Here we go. My name's Todd.
This is Cathy.
Welcome back to another episode of Zen Parenting Radio. This is podcast number 783, but it's also Zen Talk number 192. We're doing two different things here today, aren't we, sweetheart?
Actually, we're doing three different things.
Actually, we're doing four different things.
Maybe five.
Let's do six.
Well, I know
no more than seven.
We're definitely doing three because this is a podcast. This is a Zen Talk, but it's also actually it's four. We're making an announcement and we have a guest.
We have a guest, and our guest is none other than one of my best good friends and Cathy's best good friends, Dr. John Duffy.
I love you guys. Good to be here.
Yes, look, snaps up. Yes,
snapping it up.
Yes.
So for the podcast listeners, what is happening behind the scenes is Cathy and I are here with about 14. Cathy and myself and John are in the same room, and there's about 14 other Team Zen people that I hope will have some questions for us, and we got some other things that we want to talk about at the beginning. And this is just an invitation for the podcast listener to kind of have an inside look at what a Zen Talk is like, I guess. So, but first, Cathy and I have had, sometimes at night, we watch Threads or TikTok. What do we do?
Instagram Reels or TikTok.
Yeah. And she just kind of scrolls through, and the intention is to laugh, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not to get informed about the news. It's let's find something funny. And human beings are really, really funny. And the one that has been popping up lately, sweetie, that I want you to talk about is the guy who can't have a good time. What's that guy's name?
I think it is, but do you have one that you can share with people that you can pull up for people?
No, because I think a lot of it, I don't have one, but we can explain it. And then I gave you one this morning.
Yeah. So there's a TikTok of this guy, and I think the title that he uses is guy who can't have a good time.
Yeah.
And so it'll like show you like an ocean and it's just beautiful. And then like pans over to him and he's like, this vacation is so expensive.
Yeah, right.
So it's like he can't like appreciate it. And then Todd, and then we start laughing because we watched like 3 or 4 of them, and he is Todd.
Yeah.
And it's weird because Todd's not negative. He just tends to go for like the thing he's worried about, like coming down here.
A little bit of that.
Like coming down here, he's like so nervous about time, and he's so worried instead of the fact that people are here and we're fine and it's all good. He just goes to that place. And so this morning, I have this new snack that I have in the morning. It's a banana with peanut butter and honey.
And granola.
And so, and a teeny bit of granola, just so it's like a little crunchy. And I just love it. And Todd,
it's so good, by the way.
Todd had some of it because I didn't finish, and he ate it and he's like, this is so good. He's like, it's all sugar, but it's, and I'm like, is it? Because that's a banana and that's pure honey. And that's like, I'm like, it's, yes, maybe it is, but it's also the healthiest thing that, I mean, it's
and
not.
The thing is, I wasn't trying to be like the guy that we saw on TikTok last night.
I actually said to you, I'm
being that guy.
You're being that guy.
You don't have to try.
Yeah, I don't have to try. That's exactly right. Thank you, Eric. So there's more of that, I'm sure, in your life. From me.
Well, now I have a thing I can say to you. I can say, don't be that guy who can never have fun.
Right. Because sometimes I have fun, but sometimes I just see how expensive the vacation is. I think the last time we were at Disney World, there's dads with T-shirts walking around saying, this vacation is so expensive or something like that. And that's how he shows up.
Yes.
So,
anyways.
Okay. So we should probably bring our guest in a little bit. Dr. John Duffy, I don't have your bio in front of me. He's written a bunch of wonderful parenting books. He's been at every single one of our conferences, and
I can do something new from his bio. John Duffy's book, Parenting the New Teen in the Age of Anxiety, was just listed in the top 20 parenting books of all time.
Is it fair to say Cathy Adams' book also was listed on that list?
It was, but I was 78.
We're both on the list. That's the point.
And the only reason I went to the list is because of Duffy, because Duffy and I have the same editor. So like I was talking to my editor the other day and she's like, did you see that Duffy's book is on this list? I said, I did. I said, I got to go look. So I looked and I just kept scrolling because there's 100 and I'm scrolling. I go, oh, there's mine. 78. And I think Duffy's like 13.
Yes.
So you're kind of crushing me.
Yeah.
But I am in full support of that
I
crush.
think we're in the same league,
Yes.
right next to each other, as far as I'm concerned.
We
So
probably
yeah.
have had John on the podcast, I don't know, by now 8 or 9 times. I don't know. Who knows? But a lot. And I already know we have some questions from the people, from the Team Zen members. But first, sweetie, why don't you make the big announcement?
Okay, so a lot of people already know this already because we're just talking about it very normally, especially with Team Zen. But Todd and I we're doing another conference. Okay, it's a Zen Parenting Conference. Yay!
I was a little off about the drum.
Yeah,
Sorry
but
about
it's
that.
good. We're actually, Duffy, we didn't tell you this yet, but my Jess, Jess, our marketing
Yeah.
person, she hates the word conference. It's like bothered her for years. Like
Ooh,
it's so
I get it.
old
I
person.
kind of get it. Yeah.
Totally. So this year, it is not conference, it is ZenCon 25.
ZenCon 25.
ZenCon 25. We're going with it. And here's the sad part. It's our last one. So I know. Oh, that was kind of shut up.
I know. I'm
Sure.
trying to find another one.
So it's
Are you crying? There's no crying. There's no crying in baseball.
Sweetie, there's people crying right now.
I know
because
it is
it's our
very
last
sad.
conference.
It's very sad. And Duffy, like Todd said, has been a part of every conference we've ever had since day one. And he is obviously, what if we were like, and he's not in this one?
Not invited. It was,
Fine.
I'm stunned. They just told me.
We wanted to drop the bomb here in front of everybody. No, Duffy is like our keynote speaker at this conference, and alongside some of our other best favorite people in the world, Dr. Alexandra Solomon, the sisters from the Sister Project, Michelle and Lauren, one of my former students who I love dearly, who's going to be talking about mentorship, which Duffy just wrote a great Substack about. I thought that was good synergy. Plus a bunch of guys from Men Living.
Yeah.
We're going to focus on Men Living. And then Jay Alvarez is going to come in and talk about LGBTQ and non-binary identity, especially because Duffy and I are going to be focusing on our books, because Duffy, of course, is the author of Rescuing Our Sons. My book, Restoring Our Girls, is coming out in January. Snaps up. Pre-order now. You can pre-order it now. It's
Right
very
now.
exciting.
Did you say the name of it? I'm trying to do
Restoring Our Girls.
and then the subtitle.
Okay, let me take a second.
Uh-oh, this is rough.
It takes me a second. How real conversations, how I can't remember.
Yeah. Well,
It's
not reasonable. It's
subtitles.
not reasonable to be expected to remember your own subtitle. It just isn't.
We don't write them.
Yeah,
Let me just
I
be
just
very
pulled it
clear.
up on Amazon.
Okay,
They're-
thanks.
How real conversations shape our daughters' lives.
That's it.
Help them with teen challenges
Right.
and remind them that they matter.
That part I
Ooh.
put in because that's like the piece, Jennifer Wallace's book, Never Enough. And she actually did a blurb for my book. Her big focus that she got out of it about toxic, culture as far as achievement is that what kids really want to understand is that they matter, which is something Todd and I and Duffy have been talking about for 2 decades. It's not like new, but I love the word, like mattering, like no matter what, if we are getting a 4.0 or we're having our worst year of our life, we still matter. We're not being loved or lovable based on what's going on that moment in our lives. So I love this book. I love Duffy's book. I love my book. I don't know if I love Zen Parenting, the book, but this book is like, this is like Duffy works with boys all the time, right? He has this knowledge. I work with girls. This is like 2 decades of like information from them. And they wanted me to, like, my first chapter is called, Will You Tell My Parents This?
Mhm.
So this is it, guys. This is the big release.
Sweetie, you may have forgotten about something.
What?
Everything's better. Everything's
Why am I playing this?
Because on Friday night of the concert, see, it's already a concert to me, of the conference, ZenCon 25, we are hosting Glenn Phillips, lead singer of Toad the Wet Sprocket, and he's coming in to sing for us. And he's amazing acoustically. Todd and I saw him. He's amazing. He sounds just like this. Like we were like, huh?
Yeah, he hasn't skipped a beat.
No. And so he will be there Friday night. So this is
It's a
Duffy,
party.
it's so fun, right?
Oh, it is the weekend of the year. And yeah, I'm so excited for it. And everybody out there has to come because it's life affirming, it's fun, it's informative. And just for a moment on Cathy's book, there are 50, I wish Cathy had written her book first because there are 50 ideas in there I wish I had stolen.
Oh.
But also when I'm working with girls now, your words, Cathy,
Mm.
come into my head all the time. It is a beautifully written guide, and it is of the moment. It is brilliant. I love it.
Oh, thank you. Well, and Duffy wrote my foreword, so he was forced to read it very early. I don't mean like you didn't want to. I just mean like you've had it for a while.
he got
I
a
got to read it early,
Yeah.
yeah. And then I wrote the forward and then sent it to Cathy, and I said,
Yes.
you can use this if you want.
It's awesome. So we are together in this. So I'm going to be, when I get nervous about doing some kind of promotion or presentation, I'm going to call John and say, will you just do this with me? So I don't want to do TV, John. And they're making me.
Oh, let's go. I'll come with you.
I
We're going to do
know.
it.
Ugh.
Yeah, you got to do TV.
John loves
Cathy should be on TV.
John loves TV.
No, we've talked about TV though.
A little bit of TV. It'll sell some books.
I
It's going to it'll put you in the zeitgeist. It's ZenCon.
I know. It's like,
It's TVCon 25.
Missy just asked on chat the dates. Sweetie, the dates?
oh, thank you, Missy. Keep us in line here. It's so in our heads. We forget that people listening to this don't know. January, I think it's 23rd, 24th.
24, 25.
24th, 25th.
Okay.
So it's a Friday. Please.
Where-
It's a Friday and a Saturday. It always is. It starts Friday midday if you want to go to the pre-conference workshops, which you should because they're awesome. And then Friday night is Glenn and from Toad the Wet Sprocket, and then Todd and I. And then Saturday, the whole morning is John and I, because the feedback that we always get is there's never enough time for questions. So we're just going to hang out and just see what comes up. And then everybody else. And then Dr. Solomon is doing the final.
Yeah, and she's doing a piece on conflict, which I think
Conflict.
is the most underutilized topic in relationships.
Yeah.
We're not good at navigating conflict. Speaking of questions, we're just going to jump right in. You ready?
I'm ready.
Elaine, unmute yourself and ask your question and remind us how old your kids are and all that good stuff.
So, hello, Dr. Duffy. Again, I appreciate you taking questions today and everyone else's feedback too. My kids are 13 and 16. And it's 16 and a half, which I, for some reason, think is actually important. He's very different than he was at 16. And we're kind of moving into a place where I'm trying to figure out ahead of time a bit how to handle the experimentation that I see that might be coming. And I have friends whose sons are already experimenting now. And a lot of us talk about working in this harm reduction model because we realize experimentation is normal. And it feels really uncomfortable at times because sometimes when the kids are honest about it and we have to respond to them saying, I'm really grateful you're telling me this, that feels like condoning it. And so I've tried to use the language, I accept that this is going to happen. At the same time, I can't tell you that I condone what you're doing. So I'm wondering in your practice, my worry too, for a lot of us with boys is they're a little bit more thrill seeking than girls. And so they hit that edge faster. And sometimes, of course, they go over the edge. I'm wondering how you handle it, because I know you see this all the time in your practice. How do you talk to these young men about this kind of thing?
Yeah.
And before he answers, we're talking about drugs and alcohol, I assume? Experimental?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep.
Go ahead, John.
So, first of all, Elaine, I appreciate the distinction you make between 16 and 16 and a half. That's actually, honestly, these little gradations make a big difference, right? And 16 and a half feels perceptibly different than 16, right? 16 sometimes feels like, oh, he's still a kid. Like I could probably snuggle with him. We could hang out together and watch something. And then 16 and a half or somewhere in there, you feel like there's this breach, like he's kind of stepping into this other phase of his life, right? There's like almost generational feel of a gap there.
Exactly.
And the experimentation part, which again is, to your point, is really normal, is different than it used to be, right? Experimentation when I was a kid, way back in the Stone Ages, I read this week that marijuana, weed was a really heavy joint, was about 4% THC. Now, a really good vape is 90% THC. And yeah.
Isn't that terrifying? I know.
Terrifying. So,
and even if we have all these conversations and tell them this, that means nothing to them.
No.
They have no perspective.
No. And they may know this better than you do. You know what I mean? Like, so I learned this from a 16-year-old, like I didn't know, I didn't know these concentration levels or anything. And that's part of the solution, right? What you're doing, I think, is the right thing. You're opening up the conversation. I like the fine line you're walking of, I can't condone this, but I insist on talking about it, like, so we will talk about it, but know that all else being equal, I'd rather you not, like, and here are the risks, and you might know them all. I'm probably going to talk about fentanyl a little bit. I'm probably going to talk about the potential of overdosing. I'm probably going to talk about the fact that weed now is an addictive drug when 30 years ago it was not. I'm probably going to be a pain with some of the facts.
I've hit that point already that I have like literally saturated them in all of this information. Like they're swimming in it all the time, to the point that I have had to even step back from it because it became almost this persona that I had. And so I've had to kind of step back as he might be entering into this. And it feels sticky, right? Because as a mother, we wonder, where is their edge? What is too much? So I thought, who better to ask than someone who works with boys in their practice all the time.
Yeah. So if I can throw in one more thought to add, first of all, nothing you're doing, I wouldn't detract from anything you're doing. I think you're heading in the right direction. And as long as you feel like there's a connection there, even if you feel like I'm lecturing a little bit, but like, okay, the emotional bank account, we're in the black. We're good enough.
We're in the black.
Yeah. Then what I would add is a question about why, like, because if you ask 16-year-olds, okay, so you're starting to experiment, why is that? The answer to that question to me is the most important thing. If it's like, oh, my friends are doing it, I just want to see what that's like. I want to try it.
Bingo.
I can breathe a little bit through that, right? But I will persist in asking that question, maybe weekly. I'll be a pain in the neck about it.
Because that might change. That's a great point.
Exactly. That might change. And it often does, right? And if that why becomes, I feel so much anxiety now in my life that now it's medicinal for me. Now I wake and bake. I get up, I start smoking in the morning, and then, I leave third period and I start smoking then. And then I really can't fall asleep without smoking.
Or I can't get through a weekend without drinking and relaxing, and having that feeling. Right. And I think that, God forbid daily, but just the thought of them doing this weekly, like what's too much?
Right.
Tough.
And that depends on the kid, and that depends on the why, right? But to that point, weekly slips into daily now really pretty readily, more so than I want to say. You know what I mean? Like I'm uncomfortable saying that to you because, man, it is mighty work raising a 16-year-old boy right now.
I wanted to get the calendar and be like, okay, these are the weekends. Maybe if you're going to experiment this one time a month, let's just schedule this. Of course, I'm saying this in jest, but I do even say that to my son and he laughs, but he understands my point when I'm saying that to him.
Listen, and that point it carries some weight with him. So that I would keep making the point because a lot of parents feel powerless, like, no matter what I say, it doesn't matter. And I can say with authority, that's not true. Your kids are listening to you, and
I love that reminder.
Yeah, your word matters more than anything else. Even if you think, no, these peers, these kids, they're the most influential people in the lives of my kid. That is not true. Still, we are the most influential people in the lives of our kids. So I would stay on it and keep having those conversations. And the idea of adding a little playfulness to it, like that takes the edge off a little bit. Hey, let's schedule this. Like, that's hilarious and a damn good idea. Like, I actually love that and might borrow it within the next week.
Yeah.
So, I think the more creative you are about it, the more playful you are about it, and the more active you are in their lives about it, the better. And one last thing, and I'm sorry to
good. You're good.
Talk too much here, but one last thing is it's kind of like the phone to me, where the more we say, don't do this, there might be, it's kind of like, the mosquito drawn to light. But if we say, you have to do a lot of other things. Like I want your time occupied with lots of stuff. I want extracurricular things. We got to get the homework done. We'll watch a show together as a family. the more of that big bell-shaped curve that we fill in, the more all this other stuff is in the margins, right? It's something that they can only do on occasion because they're busy. And 10 years ago, I think I was saying, I think our kids are too busy. Now I'm like, busy kids. I want them active, like that keeps this other stuff away from them. At least some of the time there's some sanctuary.
Well, before I go to Cathy, because I want her to weigh in on this very normal question that Elaine is asking. And I don't know if I got this from you, John, or maybe from Cathy, but it's a little bit just the one thing that I have found Cathy and I saying to our daughters is just hang on as long as you can before you start. And, you can get into a brain science thing, but it's the truth. The older they get, the more mature their brain is, the less of an impact it has. So it almost feels like I'm on your side. Like if this is the direction your life goes in, just hang on. Can you wait till 17 instead of 16 or 15 instead of 13 or whatever it is? Because the longer you wait, the less impact it's going to have. So, sweetie, do you have anything?
Yeah, I will add to that. And I loved everything that you guys just said. I think the nice thing about the 16 to 16.5 or 17 is they are becoming more of an adult. So you don't have to talk to them in, and I know you're not, Elaine, in punitive ways anymore of here's going to be the consequence if you come home.
There's nothing like that.
Yeah, it's all conversation. Yeah. And I want, everybody listening to hear that is that sometimes the reason our kid doesn't call to pick us up, to get picked up or tell us the truth about it, maybe a negative experience they had with weed or something, is because they know they're going to get that like consequence they used to get when they were 13. That's not where we're at anymore when our kids are in these later stage of their teenage years. It's more like, let me help you through this. Let's talk about what happened. This into what, Todd just said, he's right. All three of our daughters were like, of course you're going to want to experiment, but push it back as far as you can, because going to what John said, there's a lot of things you want to do. And you don't want to get wrapped up with this too early. And you may not even like it. Like there's that piece you always have to leave that when they do experiment, it may not be their thing at all. And that's cool too. That's the ideal, right? But just talking with them in an adult way. And this is for everybody listening. Instead of still trying to control behavior, you're trying to help them through something difficult. Like if they were 25 or 26, and again, there are some parents out there who try and control their 25-year-old as well. But I just, 16.5, 17 is like, you're in such a good stage to have these conversations you're having, Elaine. It's so much easier.
I hope so. I feel like I wish that there was a magic, I don't know, some sort of way to figure out if they ever cross the line, right? I sit and watch and kind of wait and I'm always wondering, where's the line where we need to reach out for help, or we need to have different conversations, and of course I'm borrowing trouble, right? I'm worrying about something that has not taken place, maybe won't ever take place. I hope not. But it is, our mom brain.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Before we go to Jill, I know John wrote some notes down. I just want to say Missy put something in the text. She's like, totally busy kids. We expect at least one extracurricular activity or sport at all times. And it has proven helpful for the family, and agreed on the please hold off as long as possible. So.
Can I throw one thing in there? Because we always talk about this with John, like this is like, and because I agree with them in many ways. The one thing that's different, because I had a kid like this, is if they can keep their time busy with their introverted ways, because the external, all the extracurriculars, I'm all for it. Like, that's all good. And I wanted my girls to be involved in the things they wanted to be involved in. But I also had a kid for a year or two. Her goal was to read books all the time. And I didn't feel like I needed to be like, get out, because that's where she was in life. So it's like, this is all relative. And so I don't disagree with John at all, but we just want to make sure we see our kid. And if we've got a real introverted kid, and then we kind of don't need to worry about this issue as much, right? Because they're not,
right.
They're not as, social in those ways.
John, and at the risk of being a pain, I want to throw one more thought in. The word I've used for probably 15, maybe more years is like, be available as a parent, be an ally and a guide and a consultant. And I'm finding lately that word is failing me in some areas, because I feel like we need to be something slightly more than that. And I'm borrowing this from a mom I work with, but she said, you know what I am? Honestly, I'm my kid's accomplice.
Mhm.
Like, so we talk through the thing together early, like 12, 13, 14, 16, if necessary. And we'll talk about like, okay, are you getting close to where you're going to experiment with this thing? Let's talk about how this is going to go. Do you not want to do it? Because I have a plan for that. Like you can blame me. You can tell me.
Yeah, we did all that too. And it worked. It helped. It did push it. It pushed it back, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So Jill, go ahead and unmute yourself. There you go. What's up?
Hi. So I have a 20-year-old son. He'll be 21 in January. And Dr. Duffy, I've read your most recent book, and you were just writing about my son. He is he was at a community college in a technology program and doing very well. We know that he was diagnosed previously with persistent depressive disorder and has some generalized anxiety as well, and did some counseling previously while he was in high school. It seemed to do very well, but things were happening, and he decided to stop going to school. And our rule in the house was stated, you either go to school, you have a job, you need to be taking steps moving forward, and you can choose your path, and we'll support you on that. So we've been having multiple conversations, and he's just, I don't want to say refusing, but saying that he just is not interested in taking any steps forward. And we've been encouraging him to go back to therapy, to even see his regular doctor for perhaps it's time to look at some prescriptions. And my question is, he's just refusing to do counseling. He says it doesn't help. It's not for him. And so I'm looking for different words, different ways to encourage him that this is what he needs, because both his father and we feel this, and we've told him that we just feel like we need extra help. We can't, we need help outside the house to help him move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jill, I can hear in your voice how much you're affected, how much you care about your guy. And it's one of the toughest places to be as a parent, because I can hear like you've tried so hard and it must be exhausting. And I can imagine at times you feel for him. I can imagine at times you're like angry and fed up with him too. Like, come on, man, this isn't objectively, this isn't that hard. Just get up and get into life, go do something, do the thing. So my answer to your question, and this will probably feel a little redundant to you because you probably read about it, is if you think about it for a moment, nobody wants to be in your guy's shoes, right? Nobody wants to feel the way he feels. And he probably is of the belief, like so many guys I work with who are in this situation, that nobody understands. And what I'm learning from these guys is I don't understand myself. Like I don't understand why can't I just go? Like, they're well aware, like, there's college just waiting for me. There's a job out there just waiting for me. I could just go do something. Why am I just in this room playing video games or laying down, scrolling through my phone? So they don't know any more, I think, than we do a lot of the time, or they don't know how to get themselves to do it. So I was talking about being your kid's accomplice a minute ago. And part of that is, and this is a hard thing to ask, is to sit down with him and take all of this off the plate for a minute and just ask him how he is. Like, what, it's been a really hard year or two. It's been really hard for Dad and I. Tell me what this is like for you, like, and in a way, if he's not willing to come out and see a therapist like, Cathy or myself, like, you can be that de facto therapist for a while and just get him to open up without judgment, nice and easy. And the first couple of times he might blow you off. You might have to take a few shots at this, but if he gets some insight into what's demotivating him, what's stopping him from engaging, and it's probably a lack of self-esteem, a lack of faith in himself, not a whole lot of hope about a bright future for himself, the planet, the country. You know, like a lot of kids carry a lot of these feelings, so they need reasons to get out there and go. But the first thing they need is some insight into what's going on with me, and nobody's better equipped right now to draw that insight from your guy than you, Jill. And so if you get a chance to like sit him down, take him out for a meal, and just ask him like, what's this like for you? Like, this sucks for us. You know that. We've talked about that, but I don't know if I understand your experience of this time, and see if you can draw his why out a little bit, you know, because that's something he needs to understand in order to know what changes to make, because he's got to think differently about himself or the world or the future. Otherwise, even if you get him going, I've seen this so many times, you know, like, okay, finally he's out there, he's putting on the apron and he's going to Mariano's, or he's going to the College of DePage, and we're hoping this is going to work out, and it doesn't, you know, like, because he doesn't know why he's doing it. Yeah, I'm doing it to get my parents off my back. I'm doing it because I can't stand being in my room any longer. But it's not a real deep, meaningful reason for him. And so that's what we're looking for him to explore a little bit. And he might resist it. So my bias would be hang in there with him, ask him a few times, let him know, hey, whenever you're up for talking about this, I'm up for talking about this.
So before I switch it over to Cathy, Jill, how does that land for you?
I think that's good. It just, these were helpful tips in rephrasing the questions that I ask, and I'm just looking for new words because we've had multiple conversations. And I mean, we are fortunate that he's been receptive to talking. We've had some great conversations. But it is very frustrating because I'm a problem-solving type person, and to me, the answer is pretty easy in terms of we need to go to a counselor. You know, you need to take these steps. So yeah, I think this is helpful. I guess my other question is I try and figure out, like, you know, how long should this take? Like, I mean, at what point are we harming him by letting this linger? Because I agree, like, if he just went out tomorrow and got a job, that isn't going to solve it. That's just a step, but we're not addressing the root problems, I guess.
Yeah. Great question. Sweetie, you want to take a whack at that, or you want to let John?
Yeah, I mean, maybe just overall, because I just want to, you know, completely connect to what John said already, is that what you're driving for is intrinsic motivation, right? Because like John said, he could get a job tomorrow, but it won't stick if he's unsure why he's getting it. And the conversation, because you said you were looking for words, is, well, let me say this first. I think sometimes the people I work with have a very, and this is not about you specifically, Jill, but about kind of the way we look at what our kids should do. We have a very myopic view of this is the next step, then this, and then you go to school, and then you get a job. And then when they veer out of that norm, maybe negatively or positively, you know, sometimes they take gap years and do this amazing thing, but sometimes they're like kind of stuck on the couch and they don't know where to go. We try and get them back on that same path, versus, like John said, sitting down and saying, how is this for you? And what would bring you joy right now? And again, joy is very different. Like, what would numb me out? Video games, weed, all that kind of stuff. What would bring you joy? Like a kid having 6 months to like take a photography class and just learn how to use a camera. They're not bringing in any money. They're not going to school, but they may be like, okay, this I like. And I don't know what that is for your son, but maybe sometimes it's when we keep trying to get them back on the path, that's what they're trying to deviate from. They're like, this path. JC taught me this, my oldest daughter, who John knows really well. So many of her friends didn't stay in school because they're like, this path isn't for me. Now, interestingly, she's a senior in college. 98% of them are back in school, but at a different school, doing something different, work, going part-time, living closer to home. It takes a while, but don't get me wrong, they didn't go right back to another school. They were home for a year or two. So this isn't, sometimes we're trying to get them, I'm repeating myself. You got it, Jill. And John, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. Do you find that with the boys, that they veer off, but then find a new path?
And just to be clear, Jill's question is like, at what point am I harming my kid by being okay with him sitting around? So.
Well, and let me just speak to that very briefly, is that I think sometimes that time limit thing is also a myopic view of like, it's supposed to take this much time versus this is a time. this is a time that we're having right now. And let's start with the conversation that John suggested. And then, because are you hurting him by connecting with him and loving him and being there for them? I don't think so. But John, you go ahead.
First of all, I agree with everything Cathy just said. And I think we do tend to take myopic views and sometimes ancient views, right? We're still working off a playbook, and it's hard not to. I don't blame anybody for this, that we grew up with, right? So it's kind of like, hey, we expected this linear path, right? Like 4 years of high school, 4 years of college, you get the job, I get to say, well done, and this generation of kids now, they're not working on a linear path. And big picture, to Cathy's point about like JC and her friends, I'm not sure they don't have it more right than we did. You know what I mean? Like, so I think the average time it takes to graduate from college, if a young person's inclined to do that now, is about 5.1 years or something. And when I was graduating, it was 4.1 years. So everyone was we were all just going through the thing. And speaking for myself, like I went and got an accounting degree, did this like career that didn't suit me at all for 6 years. Like, I ended up having to really reconfigure 10 years later, whereas these kids are working to figure it out now. Like there's some inner voice saying, this isn't working for me right now. So Jill, to the point about your guy and Cathy's point, this might feel like a tragic time. But there's probably a way to reconfigure that in your mind, just to look at it like, okay, this is a time, and this is probably a time of growth and thought and, and consideration, and whatever adjustment you made that might feel like a fail, probably big picture, if we were to go 5 years into the future, probably isn't. It's probably an adjustment that you're making that is based on some inner wisdom. And by encouraging those conversations, it's just to find that wisdom. It's just for him to be able to bring that to his conscious mind out of his subconscious mind, because something told him, the way I'm playing this out, this is not working for my spirit. I'm going to do something different. And sometimes that something different is retreating. So the shoulds, as easy as it is to tap those and to look around on Instagram and other people's driveways and the stickers on their cars, is to take all that judgment away and say, my kid's should is what he's doing now, and I'm going to trust that he's on the right path. There isn't a right time frame, that said, I will say, I want your guy, talking to a therapist sometime in a not too distant future. And I would use parental leverage for that. Like, once you start having a couple of these discussions and it seems like it resonates and you're using language that it feels like he's hearing, then I would encourage him, like, you know what? To help you down this road, I don't expect you to invent this wheel by yourself. Let's find somebody to help you with this, because I'm willing to do this anytime with you, but there are professionals out there who might be able to hasten this process or mitigate some other like side roads, and so that you can get where you want to go in a cleaner way,
So that's all good stuff. Before we go to Millie, who's next, just a few things that came up for me as both Cathy and John were talking is, one, I want you to know, Jill, and you probably know this, you are not alone in this. There's a lot of parents out there going through the exact same thing you are. So I think there's times when we feel like we're the only ones going through this. This is a problem. I'm with young men and young women, but I would guess that it's happening to more young men than young women. The other thing is, don't go 2 or 3 years ahead. Just be here right now, which is such trite advice, but it's true. Just be here, like do today. And then lastly, just with all your might, just make sure that he knows you are on his team. And I learned that from Cathy and John, because if we are the adversary, it's just pushing him away even further. So that's my 2 cents. Millie, you are up.
Okay. Hi. Thank you, John, for being here. I'm hoping I can distill my question down, into an understandable question. So first of all, my daughter is 17, about to be 18 in 4 months, and I also have twin 12-year-old boys. who do not yet have smartphones, and we're holding that off. This is about developing healthy and good, digital habits. So of course, this daughter, she was our guinea pig with having a smartphone, and she didn't get it until the 8th grade. And in hindsight, of course, now I wish we had put a few more rules in place with the phone and laptop usage, like turning off autoplay on YouTube and say notifications with social media, apps. I did try talking to her about this, and she gave me reasons for why notifications were still needed, on her social media apps and stuff. Now, so that's the background. This hasn't come up before really until this year, senior year. Lots going on. She's got to apply for colleges and she's got extra activities. I'm just finding now that she's not managing her time as well. And some of it could be, procrastinating, and then she wants to use the phone. Some of it is just time management on the phone. I feel like we, as parents, we probably have not done as good of a job in putting those constraints in place. We did have a contract. We kind of talked about all that. And then just with time, and then there were, I don't want to bore you with some of the details, but some of that just kind of went by the wayside. I guess basically she's got one more year here at home where we're really hoping that we can help her develop healthy digital habits. And we as adults, of course, find ourselves doom scrolling and doing all the things that are not great, right?
Sure.
What do you think would be the best way to address this issue with her? I mean, I've tried talking about it, and again, she might just go, but at 17, what would be the best way to go about kind of convincing her that, these digital habits, we want to start them sooner than later?
Yeah.
Does that make a question?
That was probably more concise than you think, Millie. That was that was very clear. And I get it. And I get where you want to establish good digital habits with your younger guys too. And so, like the more we can figure this out now, the better. First of all, in so many ways, you're a pioneer, right? I mean, like, you're the first generation of parents. Like my son is 28. I managed, like, I was 2 years away from like escaping that, having to deal with precisely what you're dealing with, which is like how enticing social media is, and how easy doom scrolling is, like we all fall into it. I do it myself sometimes, and I have to remind myself, so parenting through this is really, really hard. So the first thing I would encourage you to do is not to judge yourself. I think, well, I'm working with a bunch of parents of seniors in high school right now. I did last year. All of them have the same issue. It's kind of like, oh my God, there's so many things to do. We know colleges are going to be looking at these first semester grades. We got to get these applications in, and you're looking at your phone. Are you freaking kidding me? It's maddening. In fairness to you, it is maddening stuff. So what I try to get kids to talk about is what's it like for you when you're on your phone? Like tell me about those times. Like, see if you can isolate that. And a lot of them will say like, I don't even know. Like, I never thought about that before. And my assignment to them usually for a week is like, pay attention to that. Pay attention to that and let me know. And inevitably, they'll come back and say, it feels deadly. It feels like I don't feel good about myself. I don't feel good about where my standing in the world. I don't feel good about my body. And I know I'm just like wasting time and passing time. And when kids get some insight into that, that's when they're likely to make some change, right? Without having a rule imposed upon them. And I think it's so hard, especially at 17, to say, all right, now we're going to change how you do social media, because there's so many ways around it that you're effectively creating a liar then out of your child who's about to head off into school. I also get the urgency you probably feel like, we have this 1 year, and then she's going to go off. She's going to sit in some dorm somewhere, and all she's going to do is doom scroll, and we're going to see her back here by, Thanksgiving. So I get all the panic around this, right? But if she gets some insight into what this is like for her, I'll just tell you, like, my experiences lately with kids is, oh yeah, once I pay attention to this, I got to cut back on this. Like there's this backlash in this generation, in your daughter's age, right in that age group, where they're starting to realize like, I got to put some constraints on this. I'm burning so many hours a day, and they know they're watching their usage, and they know, like, I'm burning so many hours a day. I'm wasting my time, and I feel lousy about this. I'll give you my 2 success stories. I'm working with a senior boy and a senior girl right now who decided to, and I hope this isn't appropriate, I haven't determined whether it is yet, to raw dog the internet. What they have smartphones, but they carry flip phones with them. Part of this is, I'm such a badass that I don't need to look at my social media all day long. I look at it a little bit in the morning and a little bit at night. So part of it's a little showy, it's a little flashy, but part of it is also like, I feel better. I feel better if I'm only looking at all that stuff for a few minutes a day, and I'm looking at my email and other stuff during the day, but I'm not doom scrolling. I'm not doing that thing that just has me occupied for hour after hour thoughtlessly. So that's a real thoughtful way that kids are handling this. But there are other ways too. A lot of them are just putting it down more often. They're asking their friends, like, hey, if you see me staring at my phone during lunch, can you just tell me, like, put it down? And they're helping each other out with this. So that's the kind of conversation I would encourage you to have with your daughter, is like, how can your friends, can the people around you encourage you to not feel the way you do? And I've not run into the kid who says, it feels great to me, so I don't think your daughter is going to be in that category. I think she's going to agree, yeah, I'm mindlessly doing this and I don't feel good about it. So, if we get some other people employed to help out, that works. And that works going into the college years too.
So
Great.
just so I understand, John, and I know this is just a small sample size, but there's some kids that get a flip phone, and some of it's so like, hey, look at how good I am at not being a part of the system of the smartphone. And they just use that to do the basics. And then at night, they'll give themselves an hour or 2 hours or whatever it is to go doom scroll. Is that kind of the deal?
That's the deal. And it's, my sample size right now is 2.
Yeah.
I worked with other kids who've done this, and I've heard stories of a lot of kids who are doing this.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then Captain Obvious here, but it's not a fair fight. These algorithms are so powerful to seduce us to scrolling, Kathy and I at night, like, okay, let's just do it for 20 minutes. 35 minutes later, we're still trying to find more stuff that makes us laugh. So it's not a fair fight. And the only way to do it is to remove it from something where it's easy for me to do. Like, would have to it's just really hard to turn the damn thing off.
It is. And the thing that's nice, Millie, is it's very similar to what we're saying to Elaine about now that your daughter is 17 years old. It's not going to be disciplinary, and you're not even teaching her anymore. You got to pull out of that mode of, how do we teach my daughter? You're now a peer with her. And again, everybody, I understand she's still the parent. I'm just talking about in the way we communicate. Is that now it's less about how do we teach her, how do we show her, and more about how do we relate to her? How do we talk to her about this in a way where because let me tell you, I wrote about this, and I know John sees this too. The reason that kids give for not talking to their parents about their issues with the phone is their parents then take their phones. And we have got to stop jumping to that, because that keeps them from talking to us. And they know that then as their social life is gone, their connection is gone, their way of getting, into power school is gone. Like, it's not a good solution. It doesn't mean we can't have limits and all of that kind of stuff and boundaries. It's just, we need to open up the conversation versus instead of pointing out to her, this is distracting you. Because when I was trying to do my application my senior year, before any of this stuff existed, it was, you're on the phone too much. There's always something, because they're distracted because it's all scary. Do you know what I mean? They're distracted from doing, and yes, the phone is an issue, but instead of the phone is keeping my kid from doing an application, something else would have been, keeping them. It's all hard. So the conversation is more about, I totally agree with John. How do you feel? Like my daughter, my middle daughter who's in college, she said that she has this big gap between 2 classes, and she found herself scrolling all the time in her room. And she said it made her feel so crappy that she ordered a book that Skylar suggested, and now is stuck in this novel series. And she's like, I feel like a different person. She's like, it's like, I thought I couldn't read these books anymore. And now, but I didn't tell her to do that.
She did it.
She did it.
Yeah.
We talked to her. Again, this is intrinsic motivation. We talked to her about, like what John said, how does it feel when you're on? Like, I know when I'm on for longer than 30 minutes, I'm like, I've lost the narrative of my life.
Yeah.
And so you're relating rather than imposing. It's such a different feel, and you're there because she's 17.
So before we go to Missy,
Thank you.
Millie, any final thoughts?
No, this is such great advice. I mean, and actually just the other day, I tried to get, on her level because she's struggling with these college essays. And I said, honey, man, I hated writing when I was in high school. It was so hard for me. And I basically, I empathized with her. And then I asked her questions like, so what is the hardest thing? And I, X, Y, or Z. And then she actually chimed in and told me, versus if I said, you should be doing this, you know what I mean? Because I have ideas, right? And like, I know what she could be doing. But instead of saying it that way, I just got in there with her and I'm like, hey, I went through this too. And so thank you, actually, because my husband and I were trying to think, should we sit down with her and like look at that contract again? And but
Yeah.
I think this other way might be better because school's just beginning and she's so tired. I'm like, what's up with that? So I don't know. Is it the phone? We don't know, but I would maybe explore that. So thank you.
Thanks, Millie. Missy, you're up.
Sorry about that. Hi. Thanks for taking my call or my question. I love the raw dogging the internet. I'm still really trying to understand what that means, and I've heard it so many different ways, and I'm not exactly sure I understand it, but it's hilarious. And I love slang. I love our language, and it just makes me giggle. So I love having teenagers right now. Just for a little background, I have a 14-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old son, 16 and a half. And we're dealing with a little different issue than experimentation. It came up because of baseball. And I think that a lot of times sports and extracurricular activities bring things up. And so we're not worried about the baseball part of it. We're worried about the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that the team that my son has been on is really toxic. And the main coach has had my son wrapped around his finger for about 4 years now. He kind of butters him up and then he lets him down. And my son doesn't feel let down at all. And that's not the point. The point is there's a lot of manipulation going on. And we're trying to help our son understand the manipulation part of it. We don't care about the baseball part of it. And so we've been in therapy. My son went, talked to the therapist about it. Then I went in and I was like, how do I support my son through this? Because this is small stakes stuff. And so we'd like for him to learn how to see manipulation, be aware of it, and then address it for himself as he moves through the world. And he's very much a follower kind of in that way, where he's very intrigued by the group think and the cool kids and whatnot. So we're just trying to help him with that. Like I said, we have our therapist on board, but I was just curious what some of your thoughts might be for helping someone gain awareness at this age and support.
Before we jump in, and you may not be willing to share this, Missy, but can you give me an example of what the manipulation looks like, just so I can better understand your question?
I'll try to make it brief. These things often get very complicated. We historically in Montana have not had high school baseball, but I pushed it through the school district and we got it and we funded it. Thank you. It was a big push and it was for my whole community. It wasn't just for my son. And anyway, so this other team that he's been playing for is a private team. It's called Legion Baseball. And that coach has always been toxic, not just when this high school baseball thing. He pulled my son into his office privately without anyone else there and told him he should not play high school baseball to me. And he did that to many kids on the team, not just my kid. So that to me is, it's an abuse of power. And it's manipulation. He was like, well, if you play high school baseball, we may not have a place on the roster for you. It's that kind of BS.
Yeah.
And it's just ugly. So I hope that gives a
Yeah,
little perspective.
thank you. That does help.
Thank you.
John, what do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, it does help actually. First of all, kudos to you for getting baseball out there, in Montana. I did not know that that was a thing, but well done. And I think you're looking at athletics and any other extracurricular the right way, right? It's not about the baseball. It's not about the swimming. It's not about the play. It's not about the band. It's, this is about like becoming a human being in the world, right? And, and how am I in these groups, in these difficult situations, like, what do I have agency over, right? What do I have no control over? And so to recognize like, okay, so that is a really small-minded thing to do, right? And that's hurtful. And to recognize that and to have the emotional intelligence to acknowledge your own feelings, maybe even to think about like, I wonder what it's like to be this coach, like all around there's room for discussion about like what the dynamic is at play and still continue to play baseball unless it gets overly toxic, right? If it becomes too much. But I think you're kind of hitting on why all this stuff matters. Why do we bother bringing our kids to all of these events and, getting them involved? It's really, they're learning to become adults, right? And a lot of times I think the worst coach, and I'm thinking about somebody in particular, it was a baseball coach here in Chicago. I worked with 3 of his players and they all told me the same story. And really you could feel these guys just learning how to manage that adversity and be themselves in the world. And to their parents' credit, their parents didn't do all the heavy lifting. Sometimes these kids had to say like, hey, coach, that's not very nice, or that's not very cool. And then everybody has to run laps around the football field, but there's a little bit of like, way to go, dude. Like, that was the right thing to do. And so I think kind of like, for kids to hear their compasses of morality and kindness and right and wrong and all that stuff, sometimes you have to be exposed to the ugly thing, right? And here your guy is, and he has this opportunity now to rise to a difficult occasion, and he's going to run into that in life. That's going to happen again. And he'll have that practice effect, right? Where he may be shocked for a moment and then he'll be remember like, oh yeah, this reminds me of Coach Schmidt way back then, So I think I know how to handle and manage this thing, especially if mom and dad didn't just like go into the principal and dig me out of that hole. But I was part of that process of like managing that very, very difficult situation with that adult in authority, Like I think there's just massive opportunity in what feels like an unfortunate, almost deal-breaking situation, right? Because a lot of times we get mad at these coaches because like, hey, a year ago, my kid loved baseball. You're making him hate baseball now. Like I can imagine wanting to just walk into the dugout and slap this guy. Mm-hmm. But kudos to you if that's not what you're doing and you're teaching him to manage it.
For some reason, I feel compelled to bring Elaine in because I think she has a perspective.
I live this every day, Missy, every day. And the culture here is so toxic, even at the high school level, in the schools, not the travel clubs or the pay to play clubs, but the schools. And I had to come to a deep reckoning a year ago that this is what my kids want to do. They both play baseball, by the way. They both play very competitively as well. This is what and on top of it, it's like, oh, here, go deal with this bullshit. And I'm going to pay $5,000 on your behalf to do so. Right? So it's at a whole new level. So I empathize deeply with you, but I knew for myself, I had to come to a point where I was like, this is the way it is. Like, this is literally the way it is. And funnily enough, at the conference, you guys, I was raging about this because I got a phone call about baseball while I was there. And it was after that point that I thought, I have to stop this. I have to stop looking at it this way. This is what they want to do. So instead, I've just changed. I've morphed into the person that's like, okay, this is your arena right now to learn to deal with bullshit. And this is going to appear in your life in so many different ways over and over again. And it is still hard because I feel like I'm acquiescing to the middle-aged, archaic white men that run all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's really hard. It's really hard. But I can tell you that my oldest has he can now advocate better for himself, even at school. And even differently with us because he's had to learn how to navigate some of this stuff. And toxic, oh gosh. And are they manipulated all the time? Yes. And then they tell the parents, we don't want parent involvement,
Mhm.
right? We want your son to do this, right? So they keep us out of it completely, which is probably good in the end because I want to set them on fire sometimes. It's really hard.
I mean,
Think so.
I appreciate that, Elaine. And yeah, it is baseball is its own thing, but I think every sport has its version of this. And we want him to, we don't involve ourselves in it. It's just the things he comes home and says that I'm like, you do realize you're being manipulated right now,
Just
right?
deconstruct it. Yep.
I just feel like he's not picking up the clues and he's being swayed by this person who is a very keen manipulator.
But even if he is picking up the clues, he almost has no choice but play the game, right? Like he has to be swayed to play that game and to participate, or he is the squeaky wheel, and none of them want to be that on the team too. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like my kids got an understanding because we talk about it ad nauseum when all this is happening. And I also recognize and help him talk about the fact he has no choice. And here's $5,000 more to shit on my kid. You know what I'm saying? So I hear you.
Yeah.
Sweetie?
And that's, I mean, everything you guys are saying is your son is developing critical thinking. But in the middle of developing critical thinking is the messy time and the manipulation. Just like John said, I kept like pointing to him because everything he was saying is what I would exactly say is that you don't understand manipulation until you've been manipulated. You don't understand how to speak to it until you've been forced to. You don't, and again, there's this whole section in my book. It's like my favorite part, and it's about high control groups and cults. And everyone's, my editor's like, why are you putting this in here? Because it's real. And this is a thing I see young girls, and I'm sure boys getting involved in too. It just sounds like it, where they get super controlled by like a charismatic leader. And we try and call it something else like sports, when really that is high control. That is, they're being gaslit. They're being love bombed. They're being, isolated from other people. These are all parts of what cultish things do. Now, again, notice I say high control groups. I'm very like careful about not calling everything cult because then we lose its value. But my point is you don't then say, well, then you're out because of this, but you say, this is real. And so we talk about this at home. We talk about these words. We talk about manipulation. We talk about love bombing. And then he gets to figure out, but just like Elaine said, he's in high school. He's in the middle of it. He either does it or he doesn't do it. And so how does he, and you're helping him through this, like just the fact that he comes home and tells you. And of course, most of us as parents are like, we want to solve it. I mean, my daughter just told me something yesterday, just told Todd and I something that a teacher said to her. And we were like, what? And, my first thing was like, do you want me to call? I'm always like, because why I do that, I know I'm not going to. I want her to know I'm on her side, that I see it's not fair, that I'm going to be just as annoyed as she is. That's my first thing is I see it. And she's like, oh, good. Because I felt really sad. And I woke up this morning feeling sad. I'm like, I see it too. And then it's like, then we get into, like John said, why is that teacher doing that? What's happening? This is all critical thinking, and they need that. They need bad things. We're not going to put bad things on.
It's going to happen either way. But
it's going to happen for them to learn how to navigate it. And this is, again, everything John and Todd and I talk about, have a relationship with your kid so you can talk about these things with your kid, because you can't keep them from happening. These people, these coaches, especially here in Chicago area. I know John knows Chicagoland is interesting, and I'm sure everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Everywhere.
I know. It's just what I know.
And at the risk of taking air out of the balloon, it's funny because you just finished saying, John, about how important extracurriculars are. So there's a lot of
paradox.
There's a lot of wonderful things about youth sports or orchestra or painting or whatever. And there's good and bad in all of this.
And amazing coaches and amazing teachers and difficult teachers and difficult coaches. So we're not going to us and them. We're not going to like point to the school and say they're the problem. It's human beings. Yeah. And it's who's in charge. Yeah. And,
So as we bring this Zen Talk / podcast to a close, I want to thank everybody on the team for showing up today. This is kind of what Cathy and I do every few weeks. We get John in that seat as often as we can, at least a few times a year. And we have other experts. Don't forget to pre-order Cathy's book called Restoring Our Girls.
Our Girls, pre-order and go get John's book, Rescuing Our Sons. Have them both. Put them on your mantle.
Yeah, that's right.
Boys, girls, quit. And Todd.
What?
Get your tickets for the conference.
That's right. I was
Yeah.
going to go
Okay,
there
you
next.
go.
So January 24th, 25th, it's our last one. We're going to try our best to go out with a bang. We have a wonderful lineup of speakers. It's not a conference. It's a kind of a self-awareness party. That's what I'm going to call it.
ZenCon 25.
It's ZenCon 25. And my hope is that, so all the details, all you do is scroll a little bit in the show notes of this podcast and you can learn more. I'm going to put the link to John's book, to Cathy's book, to Team Zen, which we'd love for you guys to try out. And then for the conference. So there's a lot of good stuff.
We end on like any parting thoughts that John has, like anything that is going on that it can be stuff you're doing that you want to share, but any, like, I just want you to have the final word on this.
There you go.
Okay, quick thought. Two quick thoughts. First of all, please come to the conference, guys. I want to see your faces there. It's going, I cannot tell you if you haven't been, and for those of you who have, I'm speaking to the choir, the feel good. This is placed at like the greatest time of year where it feels like, oh, this is a dead zone. Nothing good is ever happening at this time of year. And then this conference comes in technicolor into your life and makes you believe again. It's kind of like certain presidential elections movements. My final thought about your kids is I don't want to underestimate the degree to which I'm so deeply concerned about our kids these days. I am forever grateful to work with them every day because they don't know the degree to which they are good and they are kind and they are talented and smart and thoughtful, and that the future is brighter than they know, So I think the more we reflect that to them, it doesn't have to be a lecture, it doesn't have to be direct, but just like a little light in our eyes directed their way. I think I see kids, I have the luxury of seeing kids in a different light than maybe parents or baseball coaches or some other people. And this group of kids coming up, they're lovely human beings. And we need to create some gentle space for them because the world out there for them is super, super harsh.
That's a wonderful way to close. Unfortunately, I'm not going to let that be the last word, sweetie. Missy had one question, and other listeners might have the same question.
Sure.
What is love bombing?
Oh, good question. So love bombing is where somebody comes on really strong, really quickly, really early. And what their goal is in doing that is to get you in a place where you also are depending on that love and that connection, and you're feeling that specialness, possibly for the first time. And then once they know they've got you there, then they start to control or manipulate or dump on you or, decrease your self-esteem by telling you that all the things I told you before, they don't really believe. So this happens in one-on-one relationships. Like if you've ever been in an emotionally abusive relationship, which I have been, this is exactly what happened. I was told I was loved in a week and a half. You know what I mean? It happened really fast. And then all of a sudden, once you're in, then and then this happens with organizations where they love you and they're the best and we couldn't do this without you. This happens on team sports. This happens, and love bombing is a form of manipulation. So it is, what we always say to kids is you don't want to be overly skeptical of people, but you want to be skeptical of people that come on too strong or people that say the only way is this. The only way is me. The only way is this organization. You want to be skeptical of that, because anytime someone says everything you've been feeling and hurting, I can solve, bullshit. That's not true. That is not the way it works. And so this is why critical thinking is important, because sometimes when we've been wanting a relationship or wanting a group or wanting a friend group, and then they come in and say, you're the one we've been waiting for, it can be pretty enticing. I've done it. I've been in some cult-like situations, everybody. This is why I write about it. And so I'm very careful when I talk to kids and they get really excited about a person or a thing. I don't dump on it, but I say, how do you feel about this? Do you feel like they see you? Do you feel like you're getting your needs met? Critical thinking. That's all.
Thanks, sweetie. And thank you, Dr. Duffy. And thank you, Team Zen. And thanks to all the listeners. Hope to see you at the conference, reading the books, and joining Team Zen if you feel like it. Keep trucking, everybody.